Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. We have a special guest with us today, Ted Alexandro, who's one of my all-time favorite comedians. And he made some news recently because he goes up, his home club in New York is the Comedy Cellar, just like Louis C.K.'s used to be. And there was some controversy about Louis C.K. performing unannounced at the Comedy Cellar in New York. It was kind of a big deal. Ted went on stage at the Comedy Cellar and said this.
Oh, thanks, guys, for almost clapping until I made it to the stage. What does a guy have to be convicted of sexual assault to get an extended ovation? What do I have to do up here? Do I have to take my dick out? What do I have to do for you to cheer my arrival at the stage? Ask yourselves that. Oh, you know where you are. Don't you? You know where you are. Tough time for stand-up comedy. Particularly certain comedians. What's going on, though? The icons, right? They're dropping like flies. Bill Cosby's a rapist. If you had told me in the 1990s that between Bill Cosby and Donald Trump, one would go on to become president and one would be going to jail for rape, I would have got that one wrong. But what's with this PC culture? It's suffocating, right? Oh. Do you want to live in a world where a man can't politely ask a colleague if he can take off all his clothes and masturbate to completion? Are we in that? Is that where we are as a culture? In the most gentlemanly of terms, may I please take my dick out and ejaculate in the workplace? Is that where we are? Look, there are mechanisms in place for justice, right? Eventually, justice is served. You know, women complain that they're second-class citizens. But look, Bill Cosby raped dozens of women. Decades went by. The allegations were widely known and reported. Comedian Hannibal Buress told some jokes about it. It went viral. And eventually justice was served. The system works. The U.S. military has an epidemic of sexual assault and rape. People report it. It gets ignored. Why should the stand-up community be held to a higher standard than the United States military? It's fucked up, right? Very fucked up. Why can't we just return to the golden age of comedy? Why can't we put it behind us? Just return to the golden age. Let Bill go back to being Dr. Huxtable, a gynecologist with access to vaginas and drugs. They say criminals leave clues. I just thought it was a fun family show. I had no idea. It was a murder trail. Right? Why can't we just let Louis go back to writing jokes about how men are the gravest threat to safety of women? But he doesn't just write jokes, he walks the walk. And I think that is to be commended. He's a performance artist.
Ted Alexandro, stand up from New York City. You've seen him on all the late night shows, the Lettermans and what have yous, and half-hour specials on Comedy Centrals. He was active in Occupy Wall Street, so Ted's a real lefty, and Black Lives Matter and the Fight for 15. So he's a solid progressive, and he's got a new hour special out, and it's called Senior Class of Earth. Senior Class of Earth. And it's coming out, well, it's out. It's out right now already, and he's here to talk about it. It's Ted Alexandro. Hey, Ted, how are you?
Jimmy, I'm good, pal. How are you?
I'm doing good. Now, people who are watching this and don't know who you are, they're like, really? He doesn't look funny. That's what
You get that a lot.
So now you recently did a set about Louis C.K. because he did he's done some sets at the Cellar, also your home club. And you kind of called him out a little bit on it, and it was very hilarious. I'll put a link to it underneath here. And is there any backlash to that? What's happening?
No, I wouldn't say there's been any backlash. Yeah, it was basically the week that Louis came back, that first week that he kind of showed up unannounced after a 9-month hiatus. I happened to be there that whole week. So there was a lot of talk about it amongst comedians. There was a lot of talk about it in the press. So I kind of just started talking about it on stage that week and just kind of going through my thoughts on it. And, because I felt like there were kind of two ways of approaching it. The more popular way was to not say anything, and most people were opting for that. Either they didn't feel inclined to talk about it, or they didn't feel equipped to talk about it, whatever it was. But I felt inclined, so I just kind of that whole week I kept talking about it, and I wound up filming it one night, and then I was debating whether or not to put it out. But the more and more there was talk about Me Too, because it's not just about Louis. It's about, I talk about Cosby. I talk about the Me Too movement. And it was also like at the time that Kavanaugh was being appointed. So it just felt like the right time to put the clip out. So I did.
Okay. All right. Now, how do talk about how you're what do you have like a point of view in your comedy? Obviously, you're progressive. We just showed that. Now, normally comedy clubs aren't receptive to that kind of comedy, right?
It varies. Yeah, I mean, I think that's changed a little bit, that because it's such a political climate now that people are, they're consuming a lot more points of view. So that even like Occupy Wall Street, for instance, like, to talk about that on stage 6 or 7 years ago would have been like, kind of fringe. But now all of those types of things are pretty mainstream in terms of like, economic inequality and the things that became part of, just what people were talking about. So, yeah, I mean, like it has to be funny, right? That's the ultimate thing. It just you can't just get up there and start talking about economic inequality.
Yeah, no, I get it. I do the same type, I've always done the same type and, kind of comedy. And so you have to, you have to first make them like you.
Yeah. Ideally.
Ideally. Now, what about Trump? So now I don't do many Trump jokes in my act because it seems like everyone else has it covered pretty well. And it always bores me to do what everyone else is doing. And so what about you? How do you handle the Trump?
Well, I think when he first got elected, like in the special, there's a few Trump jokes.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, I hope you're not doing Trump jokes, Ted. That's not what I'm doing.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, no, but at that time when the special was shot, it was so much on everyone's mind, so much on my mind, that there is some material about him specifically. But I do try to zoom out more, make it more about like the macro, what's going on. But I have been doing a joke recently where I say, and it's funny to do it like when I opened for Jim Gaffigan in like these big, it'll be 10,000 people, sometimes 15,000. I do a joke where I say I didn't vote for Donald Trump, and then there's invariably like, boos, applause, cheers, everything. And then I say, before you get too excited or annoyed, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton either. And then again, cheers, boos, whatever. And then I say, I wrote in Vladimir Putin, and it seems to have worked out better than. So it's kind of just a funny way of like kind of poking at everybody, wherever they're coming from,
Yeah. Well, what is your take on the hysteria right now that Russia is controlling not only our elections but the elections of other countries, and really people who want Medicare for all are really just being tricked, right?
Yeah. Well, on the heels of these elections that were pretty much stolen outright in Georgia and Florida and everything else, it's like the Russians are the least of our worries. I find that so comical that's what the hysteria is whipped up around when, even going back to George W. Bush, right? The elections being stolen in America is a longstanding tradition. So it has nothing to do with whether or not the Russians are doing it.
Well, it's kind of amazing, right? When the guy who got 3 million less votes becomes president and you're worried about another country messing with our election, I'm pretty sure that's us doing it to ourselves, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a litany of things that I find more problematic than Russia, and Hillary Clinton's candidacy chief among them, and now it looks like you're hearing Biden's name more and more. So yeah, it's just the same old, and it's so tired.
So the big problem we have at this show is this push-pull of, you got to join the Democratic Party because starting a third party is way too hard. But if you join the Democratic Party, they immediately co-opt you, and so it's like what is that called? A catch-22, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is either. Some days you just want to kind of detach altogether. And that's why, I have to give kudos to you guys for doing the show. My wife and I are fans, and we watch that religiously to the point that my wife refers to herself as not the miserable liberal, but a miserable liberal. So I'm sure that you guys deal with that as well, where you kind of feel the heaviness of it all, but you got to keep marching on.
Yeah, it's sometimes after I went on my third blood pressure medication, I decided maybe I have to figure out how to unplug sometimes.
That was the signal, huh?
Exactly what it was. Yes, and so now sometimes I just don't go on Twitter for 2 days in a row.
Well, that's good. That's healthy.
Definitely very, very healthy.
I think the thing is, like with this climate, it's just it's heightened, right? With Trump, I do a joke about how with Trump you have to think about him every day. You can't get away from, like, I don't even think about my family every day, but I have to think about this guy. So that's part of it too. Is there's no escape, but you have to find ways. And if it takes blood pressure medications, then so be it.
Do you find it also kind of jaw-droppingly stunning how uninformed people are about what their government was actually doing? And now that Trump is doing it, people are way more aware of it?
Yeah, that's a fascinating dynamic too, right? That all of these things become such horrors now that Trump's in the Oval Office. And they're right, it is a horror, but to have ignored it for the last 8 years or more, it just kind of shows the contradictions in people. And hopefully they realize that it's not just because of, like, hopefully there's enough people that see, regardless of who's in office, this is kind of just the war machine. And again, as I refer to it in my special, we're kind of just always electing the next murderer in chief and putting a different brand on it, depending on if we feel progressive, that it's a black murderer in chief or a woman murdering around the globe. So it's a fascinating dynamic about how the rebranding of it can make us feel good or bad.
And that's apropos today because they're burying George Herbert Walker Bush and giving him, hagiographies, as they put it. in death, and he was a war criminal. And to get elected, he race baited just as bad as Trump ever did with the Willie Horton.
Was there like a hologram? I thought that's what you meant. Do they have a hologram of him at the?
No. Hey, a hagiography. No, you're making a joke, right? You know what hagiography is.
I know the word, but I don't know what it means.
What it means is that you actually you make someone into be an angel in death in your biography of him, in your eulogy. You give a hagiography.
Yes.
So, but for instance, people don't. So it's funny that people are starting to realize what their government has been doing all along because Trump does it. Like Trump starts to put immigrant kids in cages, and then people tweet out the pictures of the cages, and then we find out those were made by Barack Obama in 2014. You're like, we've been doing this all along, and then Trump gasses kids at the border, and then we find out that Obama gassed kids at the border too, and we say to those kids, you should feel privileged that you were gassed by the lesser of two evils.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around, like what exactly are we fighting for? Is it just to have a kinder face on business as usual? Because I think that's what it amounts to for a lot of people. They just want to have either their team in office or just him, Trump out of office. But the larger picture of like the things that are going on kind of continue uninterrupted regardless. So that's the bigger issue. And that's almost like too much to get your head wrapped around.
Yeah. You're such a bleeding heart. This is still a land of opportunity, Ted, and anybody could get ahead if they work hard enough. And if you're not ahead, you're lazy. All right. Well,
true too. That's true too.
The name of your special is Senior Class of Earth, Ted Alexandro. Where can they find this special, Ted?
Senior Class of Earth, which is an allusion to us being the final graduating class of the planet. They can find that.
Now, when you say that, you say it like then, because then there's not going to be any more graduating classes. We're all going to be dead soon.
That's right. School is closing. This is it. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that maybe we can continue learning in another dimension. How about that?
Ooh, talking about evolution.
People can find the special at atcspecials.com or tedalexandro.com. I put it out with Bill Burr and Al Madrigal's company, All Things Comedy, which is the ATC in all things.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. And we'll put a link to it underneath here, tedalexandro.com. If you guys want to laugh and you have a progressive bent, he's the guy for you. It's Ted Alexandro. Thanks for being our guest, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Our next live Jimmy Dore show is February 1st in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a list of all our live shows, and please become a premium member if you can. Become a patron. It's the way we support this show because they're coming at us, and we give you bonus. We give you hours of bonus material every week. Check it out. Become a patron. And if you can, make sure you're still subscribed. They unsubscribe people every day. I know it sounds crazy. It only takes a second. Please make sure and click that bell when you subscribe so they'll send you a notice when we drop a video. Thanks for your support.